Before shooting Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick dispatched his brother-in-law's son to photograph the entirety of Commercial Road in London. Every building was captured from multiple angles so that Kubrick could work out how each individual shop front could be adapted to look like Manhattan. His attention to detail is a key reason why he's so successful. Every shot in a Kubrick film gives the impression that it's been thoroughly planned down to the smallest detail. All of his shots seem perfect in a way that's hard to explain. Take a look at this shot from Full Metal Jacket. The barracks is clean, orderly and uniform, and the use of framing maximises this. The recruits all hold their hands at the same level. They stand perfectly opposite one another. No one stands out from the crowd. The way the line continues away from the frame gives the impression that it could go on forever, that there's an infinite number of recruits, all exactly the same. This is very much the key message of Full Metal Jacket, and time again Kubrick uses a cinematography to drive this message home. There's visuals like this throughout all of his films, and in this video we'll take a look at a handful of these exquisitely planned shots and break them down, looking at how they were filmed and how they maximise the film's message or thematic content. A Clockwork Orange was Kubrick's 9th feature film, so his style and approach to filmmaking had been developed by this point. During the beginning, Alex and his droogs indulge in some ultra-violence, terrorising whoever they can find. The shot of them before they beat up the homeless man under the bridge is particularly interesting. Their long shadows extend forward towards the camera, distorting and stretching their figures. This elevates their power in the shot. While their actual bodies are small, their shadows are huge, suggesting the fear that they inspire. Compare the shadow of the homeless man to theirs. It's much smaller, he's framed to the side and on a lower level, characterising his lack of power in the scene. This may be a stretch, but knowing Kubrick, I'd like to think it was intentional, but in certain moments the shadow of the homeless man resembles the face of Jesus wearing a crown of thorns in profile. This is of course right before he gets beaten and whipped. Kubrick uses a cold light to reflect the tone and give an ominous feel, similarly to how Private Pile is lit in Full Metal Jacket before he shoots the drill instructor.
Didn't Mommy and Daddy show you enough attention when you were a child?
A Clockwork Orange also has a very unique production design, anchoring the film in the story world. It's clear it's set in Britain, but the use of very distinct sets, props and costumes give the shots an uneasy feel, like it's a very specific nightmare.
There was me. That is Alex, and my 3 droogs. That is Pete, Georgie, and Dim. And we sat in the Korova milk bar trying to make up our Razoo dogs what to do with the evening.
Dr. Strangelove similarly features an iconic and distinct looking main set. We can see a sketch here of what Kubrick intended for the war room in Dr. Strangelove to look like, and it was pretty faithfully reconstructed in the final film, with the giant round table and the massive circular lights around the perimeter, and of course the big board, as General Turgison calls it. It's a bold design, far beyond function, and instead gives an imposing feeling. Whoever built this must be powerful and in control. The cinematography shows off this large set, using lots of wide angles where the characters are very small in the frame to emphasise the size of the room. This elevates the film's themes, reflecting the hubris of the leaders who use the room, with the conflict of power and control being built into the visuals.
Am I to understand the Russian ambassador is to be admitted entrance to the war room?
That is correct. He is here on my orders.
Dozens of these all-powerful men sit around the table with every scenario thoroughly planned and given a designated set of instructions for all involved. Yet all it takes is a single loose cog in this machine for the world to face nuclear annihilation. The big board offers little comfort when the world is edging closer to Armageddon, and the visuals emphasise the power of the characters. But this becomes a symbol of irony as the film unfolds and as the characters lose grip on this power.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
One of the most unique things about Kubrick's career is how different all his films are. He can go from a hard-bitten World War I story to a philosophical sci-fi epic. He's explored numerous settings and styles throughout his career, yet remains true to his personal ethos of attention to detail and extreme control over what's in the frame. This is how he can go from such a dystopian story in A Clockwork Orange to an 18th century period piece in Barry Lyndon, while A Clockwork Orange's cinematography works to unnerve us, with its framing suggesting something isn't quite right, Barry Lyndon captures the beauty of the world with a lightness, inviting you in instead of scaring you off. In many ways, the camera work emulates an oil painting. Cinematographer John Alcott states that the actual compositions of our setup were very authentic to the drawings of the period. Many of the shots are wide and use a deep focus, ensuring most of the setting is visible. The characters often seem to be just part of the scenery, with the grand halls or expansive fields swallowing them up. Part of this is a large amount of headroom. Take a look at this shot here. The frame extends far past the characters' heads, making them feel like just a natural part of the scenery. It's only relatively recently that subjects' heads have been typically displayed at the top of the frame. Many traditional art has lots of headroom, and Barry Lyndon reflects this. In this shot, there's also lots of room to the left of the screen. Typically, Kubrick uses more symmetrical framing, yet steers clear of this here. This gives a more naturalistic impression, that the characters aren't perfectly placed in the centre for our viewing pleasure. Their poses are also reminiscent of a Renaissance painting, with each character physically embodying their emotional state. All of this combines to create a candidness which is common for such old school paintings. Alcott stated that in preparation for Barry Lyndon, we studied the lighting effects achieved in the paintings of the Dutch masters. In most instances, we were trying to create the feeling of natural light within the houses, mostly stately homes that we used as shooting locations. In this shot, but also throughout the film, the heavy reliance on natural lighting is clear, be it with the vast, cloudy skies that invoke a biblical feeling, or the quaint, sunny scenes. The lighting gives the film a naturalistic, true-to-life feel. They also relied on candlelight during the night scenes, which is in line with a general trend throughout Kubrick's films of using diegetic lighting. This is light sources that are visible within the frame and fit within the story world. Kubrick really developed on his use of diegetic lighting with his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, seeing extensive use of on-screen Christmas lights, which adds a warm tone to the scenes. This not only establishes the setting as around Christmas time, but also feeds into the film's themes. The excess and overabundance of Christmas lights reflect the consumerist nature of the story world, how everything can be bought or sold. No one really mentions Christmas other than to remind each other how much shopping needs to be done.
I hope Santa Claus gets me one of these for Christmas.
The film also explores family and wholesomeness in the face of infidelity and betrayal. The Christmas lights had a dreamy and almost nostalgic glow, representing a wholesome family holiday. But eventually, after a rift forms in the central relationship, some colder lighting finds its way in. The visual difference in warm and cool lighting represents a split in their relationship.
So on that basis, I should conclude that you wanted to fuck those two models.
Kubrick is a master at using lighting to elevate the story and emphasize the thematic content. This is also on display in The Shining, which uses warm lights with almost a sepia tone during the scene with the ghost bartender. This gives a vintage feel to the shots, as if we're stepping back in time. The Shining also displays an interesting use of camera movement. The Overlook Hotel is a haunted and powerful place. One way this is shown is through the moving camera. Throughout the film, the camera glides through the hallways, stalking the Torrance family as soon as they move in. This gives the impression that there's an outside, metaphysical presence, and gives us a glimpse into the perspective of these supernatural forces. This perspective is not only seen stalking its way through the halls, but comes to fruition during the climax of the film. When Jack is breaking down the door, the camera follows each swing of his axe, whip panning to the right and then stopping on impact. By connecting the camera movement to Jack's movement, his physical power is elevated, as if it's spilling over into the film itself. It also further connects the supernatural forces to Jack's rampage, visually representing how they're intrinsically linked. This unusual use of camera movement adds to the deep sense of unease that's present throughout The Shining, and this anxiety is also elevated by the iconic carpet design. The bizarre pattern relies on many of the same principles as optical illusions, giving the impression of movement or shapes when there isn't any. It adds a slight sense of unease as our mind struggles to work out the pattern and what shapes it's showing and how the colours interact with each other. This adds to the unsettling ambience of the Overlook Hotel. Much like Barry Lyndon can almost feel dreamlike in its painterly visuals, The Shining can at times seem like a nightmare due to the way the scenes are filmed. Kubrick uses all kinds of visual techniques throughout his films to convey meaning and elevate the story he's telling. Each film is unique in the sense that they occupy entirely different worlds with entirely different themes and concerns. But despite this, you can often tell a Kubrick shot when you look at it. It's hard to identify why. They just have this indescribable quality that no one has really been able to replicate. Part of this is his use of one-point perspective. This is when all of the horizontal lines in a shot are angled towards a single point. They direct your eye to what's important, and this usually lays in the centre of the frame. Kubrick is known for making heavy use of symmetry in his visuals, but this can be refined to his use of one-point perspective. From 2001 to Eyes Wide Shut, Kubrick has relied on this technique throughout his career. In real life, humans rarely see the world in one-point perspective, but in using it on screen, Kubrick invites us to see the world from a different angle. His films typically occupy a world that is exaggerated in some regard. It's a world that's familiar to us, but not quite the world we live in, and his use of one-point perspective, viewing the world from a different angle and through a different lens, reflect this. You could look at almost every shot from a Kubrick film and find something unique and interesting that helps elevate the film in some way. His films have a timeless quality to them. They simultaneously seem like they could have been made today or 50 years ago. The techniques I've mentioned in this video barely scratch the surface of what Kubrick has to offer, with it seeming like he genuinely sat down for hours and planned every shot down to even the smallest, most meticulous detail. Despite the strength of the story he tells, it's how Kubrick uses a camera that earns his place among the cinematic pantheon of directors, packing as much meaning into the frame as he can. His style is so eclectic, yet so distinct. His influence on cinema as a whole is immense, yet no one has replicated it since. No one can make a film quite like Kubrick. Next time you watch one of his films, I'd encourage you to really take the time to absorb and take in the visuals. Look at what techniques are being used, and ask yourself, why did Kubrick frame the shot like this?